when did Perry get upgraded from friends to something a little bit more significant?
Oh, that took a while.
I say date your friends.
We were having a conversation one night and we were like, you know what, let's just compare genetic results with each other, like from genetic testing. We both had done J-screen previously, and it was seriously like just an off the bat comment.
Yeah, I think it was just like, oh, hey, have you ever done genetic testing? Right. Oh, yeah, I have. What about you? Sure.
But I doubt that there's anything. Out of 236, I'm only positive for 4. He said he was only positive for 1. So we're like, there's no way. So we get to our phones, we scroll, have our results, we pull them up.
When you saw those results, what were you feeling?
I literally thought she was joking when she said what it was. I'm like, no, that's what that's mine. That can't be yours. What is it, like 1 in 50,000 or something?
Something like that.
How many years were you married for, and how old is your baby?
In October, we'll be married 3 years, and he is 4 months old now.
Welcome back to another incredible episode of Stories of Hope. In this week's episode, we feature Reena and Perry Fox, a couple who is brave enough to have a conversation that we haven't discussed yet. What happens when you're navigating the Upper West Side, dating, relocating, trying so hard to meet the right person, you finally do, only to discover your greatest nightmare. That 1% chance that you're genetically incompatible happens. In this week's episode, we hear the brave and raw story from Reena and Perry and the choice they decided to make in moving forward, even though they were genetically incompatible, in understanding what life choices they would have to make, and having this informative, educational, and really inspiring conversation with a couple that decided to do something that maybe many people don't do.
But first, an important message from our friends at JOMASHOP. I was recently in Scotland and London and saw someone with a beautiful watch. I asked them where it was from, and it's from JOMASHOP. They have over 1,000 brands carrying over 75,000 products in the fields of accessories, fragrances, jewelry, watches, whatever you want, they have it. They have over 1 million reviews. As a company that's been around since 1999, JOMASHOP really has everything you want. When I was in the London airport, I saw a pair of sunglasses I wanted. I always get sunglasses at the airport because then it's duty free. But I checked JOMASHOP and it was actually cheaper to purchase them from JOMASHOP. So thank you, JOMASHOP, for providing the best prices, the best accessories. If you want to make a purchase for you, a loved one, a friend, an anniversary, a birthday, you don't need to waste time looking anywhere else. Go to JOMASHOP. I can guarantee you they won't just have what you need, but they'll probably have more. And the best part is, if you put down in the discount code SOH120 to receive $120 off your purchase of $3,000 or more. So go to jomashop.com to find the best product for the best price from the best place.
I know you're going to love this episode. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a part of the change. Welcome to this week's episode of Stories of Hope.
Hi, I'm Tzipora Grodko, and this is the Stories of Hope podcast. Reena and Perry, thank you so much for coming in today. I'm really excited to hear your story. It's really unique from anything that we've featured so far, and I think it's really important. It's an important conversation that hasn't been spoken about, and today that's going to change. So before we jump into it, Reena, can you just tell us in a few minutes a little bit about your background, where you're from, to help us get to know you?
Sure. So I'm originally from Boston. I grew up going to a modern Orthodox mixed school, then went to a Beis Yaakov for high school. So I was kind of put into a weird box for dating wise. I was kind of like, people constantly read me really from guys. Which was not what I was looking for. I went to an out-of-town Beis Yaakov, wasn't really Beis Yaakov anyways. Like, I wasn't Beis Yaakov-y. So dating at the beginning was hard because I was constantly getting read the wrong people.
Yeah, because people look at your background and where you're from, and then they look at where you are now, and they can misinterpret what you actually need.
Right. They saw Beis Yaakov. Okay, great, black hat guy. Nope, not what I was looking for. So it took me a while.
We'll talk about the irony about that later. when we get to my story.
Yeah.
Have you been black-hatted?
Well,
against
he
your
used to
better
wear
knowledge?
one, actually.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler. He used to wear one and stopped wearing one
Before we met.
right before we
Yeah.
met. And it's a joke because I would never have like even taken a second look at him if I knew he wore a black hat. But yeah.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to getting there. So you grew up in Boston,
Yeah.
went to a modern Orthodox co-ed school, got to Beis Yaakov
Yeah.
somehow, and this
There
is
were
where
many options in Boston. So.
right. And this is where you're at now.
Yeah.
So Perry, tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
So I'm from New Jersey, Elizabeth. Grew up going to modern Orthodox schools. So I went to JEC, went to Kushner. As was mentioned, I actually wore a black hat for my bar mitzvah till I was about 28. I was never really like a black hatter though. Like I wore it for whatever personal reasons I wore it. But I was also finding that I wasn't necessarily being set up with the right people because of that. Either people didn't want to go out with me because, you know, they don't want to date someone with a black hat, or I was getting set up with people that didn't want someone like me who was, you know, more modern and, you know, would watch TV, go to movies and, you know.
And so black hatter from Elizabeth, New Jersey is not usually a sentence that people oftentimes hear.
No, that's
or
not,
it is very common.
Yeah, in Elizabeth, probably, certainly when
It's
I
a
was
mix.
growing up, it was a mix. Maybe half of my friends growing up had hats,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly a little more, I was on the more modern side of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it sounds like it's difficult to represent yourself in a certain box when maybe you don't practice according to the options that the box lists.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can often lead to maybe dating the right people or feeling confused on how can I date the right person?
Right.
If these are the questions thrown at me and it seems to be the crux of what matters. So let's jump into the beginning of your dating experience, Reena. How many years did you date for? And tell us a little bit about what it was like.
So I started dating right after I think it was my 20th birthday. It was like my first date was like 2 days later. And we got married when I was 30, so about 10 years. The beginning, I did all shidduch dating, basically. I worked with NCSY, so I met some guys that way. I had a couple of dates from that, but mostly it was all setups, YU Connects. J-Swipe wasn't a thing yet. And then I actually moved back home. So I was living in New York, and then I moved back home to Boston for nursing school. And dating just like didn't really exist for those 2 years. I came to New York for a couple of dates, mostly just if people I knew set me up. I wasn't gonna do like a random person setting me up and waste my time coming down when I was studying so hard. And then I came back to New York and I settled into Washington Heights, and I had a few relationships while living in Washington Heights. One local, one long distance, which was very challenging. And then COVID hit and everybody left and no dates were happening, and I kept trying and nothing really would happen. I, was set up with one guy and he's like, I don't really want to come from Jersey to the city because of COVID. And I'm like, you have a car, you're not going to see anybody, but okay, fine.
You even tried an online dating game.
I did an online Love is Quarantine. It was fun. It was very fun. But nothing really came of it. And so I was like, all right, Mishdem Makom, Mishdem Mazal, I'm gonna move. So middle of COVID, I moved to the Upper West Side. And kind of did the whole game again, like, meeting new people, but now amidst COVID, so it was like much more challenging. And then this guy decides, oh wait, she doesn't live in Washington Heights anymore.
Now's a good time.
Now's a good time to ask her out.
Okay, so let's pause you right there.
Yeah.
And that was a very clear like transition from where you started to where you were to the switch. And before we get to Perry, I want to address two questions. My first is when you were in Boston, in school, I presume, and you were dating at the same time. What was it like to be in a city where maybe you felt like, I know all the single people here and I want to be married, but I feel like I also need to be in this location. How did you come to terms with that, or what was it like for you?
So I knew that being in Boston was going to be a short-term thing. I knew I was going for nursing school. and that I was coming back to New York. So, because that's where the dating scene was. I definitely prioritized school during those 2 years because I was like, all right, I'm doing an accelerated nursing program. It's nursing school in 14 months. It's intense. I got to focus on this. And then eventually I'll make my way back down to New York. During that time, it's actually one of our close friends now, we were set up together. And I remember he was one of the only people I went out with while I was in nursing school. I maybe went out with 2 other guys one time. And none of them were in Boston. They were all in New York or New Jersey. Like you said, I knew everybody in Boston. Like, there's single community there is really tiny. It's a little bit bigger now, but when I was there, it was.
So was that discouraging for you?
Yeah, but I think that my mind was so set on just doing school at the time that I was okay not having the dating. It was also, I feel like, so long ago, it's hard to remember exactly. So much in my dating has happened since that's like so insignificant. But it's hard being like an out-of-towner and not being in the place where everybody is single, whereas New York is basically the hub. It's very challenging. And knowing that nobody's going to come to you, you have to go to them. If you're trying to date somebody and you're the out-of-towner, you're going to be the one traveling. And that was hard. Like, driving down to New York every few weeks for a date was definitely
And is
hard.
that like written in the Declaration of Independence and
Apparently
the like 10
no.
Commandments? Because you're saying
for
that
New
as
Yorkers,
like a...
it is.
It is. Interesting.
Yeah, there was nobody came up to me. I always had to come back down.
That sounds a little unfair.
Yeah.
I mean,
I understand, but I wonder if there can be like
I
compromise
was in
of
towner,
middle
so-
ground.
Right. You're
Right.
an in-towner, so you don't know what it's like.
Yeah.
But
the one out of towner I dated, I did drive to
you
Boston,
did. That's
ironically,
true. That's
and I
true.
don't mean her.
Right. That's true. You did do the driving. Yeah.
Only once or twice.
Well, I like that as a nice point to put out there, that if it is this set standard that people assume to be like the truth and the only truth, it sounds like it would be really difficult for both parties. So why not always work together to
Right.
make things
Yeah.
a little easier? So now I'm really curious to hear, we're going to stop you on that cliffhanger. Perry, tell us a little bit about what your dating experience was like. As you said, I don't know if you said like closeted black hatter, but
No.
describe where you were at and
Okay.
what it was like.
So I started dating, I think it was my senior year in college. I didn't want to date till I was ready to get married. And I didn't want to get married till I could support myself and my wife. So like, it wasn't really a point for me to, to date earlier. So I was like 22 or something when I started dating. And probably mostly setups from friends and family and stuff like that. Sometimes there would be a shotgun involved, but never like formal, anything like that. As the years went on, I moved more to just like asking people out that I met naturally, living in the city, meeting people that was more available, and mutual friends setup would also be, common. So when friends were setting me up, or when I started using, Saw You at Sinai or YU Connects or whatever they were, so that's when the black hat thing became an issue. And I remember when I stopped it, when I went to like a Shabbaton, and it was like, it like put me in the wrong box when people saw me on Shabbos wearing a hat, and I wasn't who they wanted to date, or they weren't who I wanted to date based on that.
Based
Right.
on the hat.
But what I found was like people that I met in person, it didn't matter as much. So if it was like someone I knew from shul who has seen me and spoken to me and interacted with me, it didn't really matter as much. But because there was a lot of that like website setup kind of stuff where it was more sight unseen,
Mhm.
I decided it wasn't where I was anyway. Like I didn't consider myself a black hatter. So put it aside and haven't worn one in, however many years since then.
So I actually have a question on
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
For men that are hearing you talk and they're relating and they're saying, yeah, there's something I do that's tradition maybe in my community, or I was told to do it to attract a certain person, but it doesn't feel authentic to me.
Right.
What might you tell that person listening?
So here, a little background. Like when I was wearing a black hat, I was doing it because it helped me to act a certain way. It helped me to motivate myself to make sure like I got to shul on time, and I, wasn't talking during davening, and because I shouldn't, but like I felt like people would judge me, more as someone who looked a certain way. So I used that as a motivation to behave better. That's probably not a healthy way to do it. And as I got older and perhaps more mature, I found other ways to motivate myself and to work through that. So it was no longer like necessary for me, right? And I would say that to them, if it's something that you're not doing for a reason, then there's no reason to do it. And if you are doing for a reason, is it the right reason, or is there a different way to achieve what you're trying to do?
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, at this point you moved to
Right. So I started dating my last year in YU. I actually spent 2 years living in the Lower East Side, and then from there I moved to Washington Heights, where I lived until we got married.
Okay.
So that was 2 years in the West, in the Lower East Side, and then 12 years in the Heights or something like that.
Wow. And tell us again, how old were you when you got married?
36.
Okay. And what was it like while you were dating, and you were dating for a while, from 22 to 36? So that's like
14 years, something like that.
Thank you for doing the math for me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, 14 years. During that time, did you ever feel really discouraged, disappointed?
Oh, sure.
And think like, is this ever going to happen for me?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the same as anyone else. At any time after like a bad breakup, that's kind of the thought process, and then you kind of reevaluate where you are, and it's like, am I in the right place? Am I looking for the right people? Am I prioritizing the right things? All that stuff. Usually that passes, in a few days or weeks or whatever, depending on how serious the relationship was. But certainly, each time that happens, you kind of think about where you are and what you're doing. So over my 14 years dating, that probably happened a few times.
Mm-hmm. And what helped you stay optimistic? Unless you didn't, which is okay too.
For the most part, I did. I mean, like I said, there were certainly times where I'm like, oh, this is never going to happen, But I think I had a good support system, both in, family and friends. The family could sometimes be like, why aren't you married yet? We want more grandkids or whatever, But for the most part, they were supportive, and it was all in good support.
Yeah.
And having the friends also helped. And Reena had the same thing. I know in the Heights, we had a very good friend group that was supportive, and there was mostly singles, but for myself, having been in that same community for many years, and it still is a very transient community where people will come in for a few years, usually get married, and then move out. Right. That's like a pattern that happened. And I've said, like, I went through 3 or 4 friend groups over the 12 years I was there. People move in, we become friends, they get married, they move on.
Yeah.
All go to Jersey. Most go to Jersey. And then a new group moves in, and I make new friends who are now 2 or 3 years younger.
Yeah.
And so by the time
I was friend group number 4.
Right. So by the time, I'm there 35 dating, most of my friends are, 30 or lower kind of thing. And I'm on like a third group of friends. So that kind of can get a little, depressing. I'm always the oldest one in the room kind of thing. But everyone is very supportive and in the same, stage of life. And everyone's going through the same thing. Seeing other people with the same struggles and the same, successes and failures is certainly very helpful.
And we never really looked at age. Like, we had our friend group probably spanned 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
We never looked at age.
Irrelevant. So surrounding yourself with like-minded people helped you feel supported,
Absolutely.
less alone, connected, engaged in things that made you happy.
Yeah, I'd say the
100%.
Washington Heights community that we found ourselves in is a very special place. Our friend group is a very special group, and they're going to be like our lifelong friends.
Yeah. We'll be right back. But first, a really cool message from our friends at Growtha. If you want help transforming website traffic, becoming #1 at Google, I made a new friend who works at Google who told me what Growtha does is how you want to do it. Growtha does SEO for over 100 healthcare companies, from addiction treatment centers, ABA therapy companies, nursing homes, home care agencies, you name it, they do it. These are the people you want to call if you want to increase the success of your business. It's really just a matter of statistical, technical work. Call Growtha, call our friend Josh, let him know you heard about his exceptional company from us, and receive 10% off when you mention Stories of Hope. You no longer need to spend so much time trying to gain traction in these healthcare industries. All you need to do is schedule a call with Growtha, and they will tell you how you can increase your success with a 10% off discount once you mention Stories of Hope to our friend Josh. So again, if you have a nursing home, assisted living facilities, addiction treatment center, ABA therapy, this is the place you want to go to. Call Growtha, find them in the show notes below, growtha.com, and mention Stories of Hope for 10% off to our friend Josh. And I do want to say, I feel like the modern Orthodox upbringing, which at times can be very much focused on academia before marriage, it does lend itself to social development.
Yes.
And I think that's something that helps the process, which can often lead to so much loneliness. So if people in the community don't move out after college, because it's assumed you're going to get married in a few minutes, so you'll move out then, and the people around them are not in the same stage as them, it can feel so lonely. Right. If there's a stigma for people to move out and they think people are going to say negative things about me because it's not done in our community, then again, there's so much isolation, there's so much loneliness. And I think there's so much to learn from every community. So I want to encourage listeners to consider, hey, if maybe where they're living, there's so much loneliness, where can I find like-minded people? Yeah. And like you said, it has to be the right people. Mm-hmm. And that's where I want to jump in to what your experience was like when you moved to Washington Heights, because from what I understand, you and Perry were first friends.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we were friends for 5 years.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So I moved to Washington Heights when I got my first job in the city, and I think I was 25, and within a few months, I had this amazing, supportive group of friends, and we just had a lot of fun together. Of course, there was always, oh, do you like him? Do you like her? Type of situations. I think we both can say that we both had relationships with other people in our friend groups. And it was just like, it was a fun place to be, and it was a supportive place to be. We always say, like, our friends became our family. A lot of us maybe weren't able to go home that often. We weren't local. So I went home, usually Sukkot and Pesach, and that's it.
Right.
And we did Shabbos every week together, and you become family.
You become family, yeah. And so when did Perry get upgraded from friends to something a little bit more significant?
Oh, that took a while. So COVID, we were in each other's like social pod. Everybody was kind of like podding so that you weren't exposing yourself to too many people.
Yeah.
So
I'll add, it was hard living in the city. I know people that were like in the suburbs had a very different experience, but like I was in a studio apartment by myself, right? If I didn't have a pod, I was literally seeing no one all week. Right. Maybe I would, mask up and go to the supermarket once a week. And like, that was it. So like
you and the clerk had a nice heart to heart.
It was really important that you had like that group of people, and you limit it so you don't expose yourself too much, and, however many people, and you be responsible about it. But we were very responsible.
Like it was probably like 10 of us, and we would only do a meal of 5 of us at a time. And I was working in the hospital in New York, so I was seeing a lot of COVID, a lot of sadness. And Shabbos was like my one time that I could relax and kind of see some light. And the friends did that for us. We were in each other's pod, and we spent a lot of Shabbos together. So we got closer, and I decided to move to the West Side. And on I think it was the last Shabbos I was there, or one of the last Shabboses.
God is very dramatic. He likes a nice entrance. Yeah.
Lived there for 4 years, 5 years, whatever it was. And literally lived down the block from each other the entire time. And we were having a conversation. It was a hypothetical. If we were on a deserted island, and from our friend group, we had 5 guys, 5 girls.
So it wasn't just us. This was a group of people after Shabbos meal.
4 of us talking about it. And if there was a deserted island, 5 guys, 5 girls from our friend group were put on the island, who would be put on there and why? So we were each put on there for different skill sets. And then after the 5 guys were listed, I was like, okay, I call Perry. Like, out of the 5 guys, he was the only one I'd really choose.
To be clear, I think like 2 of them she had already dated.
Yeah, that's true.
And like 2
Perry's
were
like, don't give me so much
Yeah,
credit.
no, she made this caveat when this happened.
It's
Okay.
true. I was like,
She's like, I want to be clear. This
He's
is
his best friend.
Yeah.
Him, I'm not interested in.
Yeah.
So it came down to Perry. And apparently it was totally innocent of me. I really did not mean anything by it. He had just come out of a relationship. I had come out of a relationship about 9 months prior and was still on the outskirts of that. And I wasn't, we really didn't mean anything by it.
So let's pause you there. Perry, she's like, I didn't mean anything by it.
Yeah.
But you heard it. So what went
I
on
heard
in
it.
your head when you heard that?
No, so to rewind a little bit, like when we had met, I think when we met, she was dating a friend of ours who we're both friends with now.
Yeah.
And then like, so at the time it was never like, hey, that's someone I'm interested in. It's
By the way, they're all going to watch this and know
that's
who
okay.
we're talking about. And it's going to be the best thing ever to see the reaction.
So at the time it was, never a thing. And then we hung out as, in our friends group and we got to be friends. And it's very hard to move away from being friends, right? Like once we were in that friend label, even after they
Friend
broke,
zone.
even after, her and the guy broke up, like we were all still in the friends group and she was at that point already a friend. So that's how we saw each other. And that's how it stayed for years.
I think
And
also we never overlapped single. Like
I'm sure we
not
did.
for a long enough period of time. I don't
But
think.
right. We both had relationships on and off throughout
You
that
were friends
time.
while dating other people.
Yeah,
Correct.
exactly.
Right.
And so fast forward, 4 years or whatever, this conversation happens. And it's not like there's nothing like immediate. It's not like, oh, I love this woman. I have to marry her. It was more just like a blip that was like, you're in the friend zone, but look what she just said. Think about that for a second. And it took some time. And, over the course of the next few, weeks or months, it was just like, I hadn't considered her in that way because we were friends.
Yeah.
But what if I do? And then a few months later, I asked her out. That was not exactly that straightforward or simple, but
Not
basically.
exactly.
And so on that note, do you think, and this is a hot topic for people in the West Side, for people in the city, and people have come up to me about it, what's your take on there being so many people, men and women, who are good friends, but yet for some reason aren't considered as maybe a good date, a good person to date?
I say date your friends.
We're very big proponents of date your friends.
I mean, the truth is,
we're
like,
one of 5 friend couples
so
in our friend
the
group.
the goal is to like marry your best friend, right? Like this is the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with.
And if you already know you get along with
Right,
each other,
having
you
it be
phone
someone
each
that
other,
you
that's one
like,
step.
that's a good thing, not a
Right.
bad thing, right? The fear, and I understand where people are coming from. The fear is that you don't want to lose the friendship you have with that person, and maybe even more so, you don't want to ruin the friend group dynamic.
Right.
And I've dated a few friends before Reena, so like I kind of knew how to navigate that. And I'm trying to think. I think in all those situations, it was fine. It never like was detrimental to our friend group. But I know some people where it ended up, splitting the group kind of thing.
Which happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the most part, I found though, as long as you're kind and respectful about it, like it doesn't have to. Like there are people that I went out with even for 2-3 months and we're still friends today, and it's fine.
And if it's on the crux of date your friend, like because you want to be friends before your partners, then I would think for those listening that have a few faces popping up, I would think that the gain is worth the risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so.
And
I don't regret dating any friends where then it didn't work out or ever. Like I don't regret if the friendship got ruined, because I'm also a very strong believer in you learn everything from each relationship. I mean, you learn something from every relationship. So if it doesn't work out, you might lose the friend, but isn't it worth it to like see maybe you gain a best friend for life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's the fear over the
It
facts.
Oh, it's a fear.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
100% a fear. Yeah.
But I really appreciate hearing your perspective because you are both from that world. You lived there and you did it. You're the product of we actually tried this.
Yeah.
So after you were dating, you're dating seriously, you're both very interested in each other, and you're considering to get married. So what happens then in your story?
Yeah.
Because I know that's a big turning point.
Yeah. So so first off, so he had been thinking about this for about a month or two, and I was totally blindsided by him asking me out. I was not expecting it at all. So this is already like ruminating in his head. And for me, when he did ask me out, I was like, I'm not sure about this, but we'll give it a shot. So it was a very new and novel idea in my head. And about 3 weeks into us dating, so it's still very new to me, we were having a conversation one night and we were like, you know what, let's just compare genetic results with each other, like from genetic testing. We both had done J-screen previously, and it was seriously like just an off the bat comment.
Yeah, I think it was just like,
of it.
oh, hey, have you ever done genetic testing?
Right.
Oh, yeah, I have. What about you? Sure.
Right. It was very early to discuss it. I do not know why it was brought up, why we discussed it. It was shared, I guess, because I had never talked about genetic testing that early with a partner before.
And in both of your schools, did they ever have someone come to do genetic testing?
Not for me.
So it's funny. They did at YU when I was there. I did not have it done then. I actually had it done because a different girl that I was dating asked me about it and then broke up with me like a week later. But at the time, she wanted to know. And I'm like, I don't know. I hadn't done it. Right. So like after that relationship, I'm like, I guess I should get this done.
Okay.
So I did. But yeah, definitely.
And I did it when I started dating in Washington Heights. I hadn't done it before that.
And how did you know it was something to do?
I think it's just always
in our community, it's in both of our communities. Yeah. I think it's pretty open.
Like I remember my two older
known.
Sisters doing it before they got engaged.
I know a lot of communities, certainly more to the right than ours, are big like Doria Sharam, where like you don't get the results, but also you don't get actual results, right? You get a number and it gets compared.
So I actually want you to clarify for those listening what the difference is.
Right.
Sure. So Doria Sharam does your genetic testing. They don't test for all the diseases. I don't know exactly how many, but I know it's a lot less. It's only like the red flag hot ticket ones that run in the Ashkenazi Jewish circle. I believe it's like 50. And you get a number. And when you're set up with somebody, you can call Doria Sharam and you say, my number is this, their number is this. Are we a match? And they just tell you yes or no. J-screen tests at the time, I mean, I did it almost 10 years ago. There was 236, I believe, diseases that they test for. Now they do up to like 500. And you get your actual results, but not only that, you get a genetic counselor calling you to go over your results. And then they email you
what they mean
also.
And what the possibilities
are. The probabilities are
of
some of somebody else having it, the probabilities of you having a child with it, etc., and like what that child would look like.
And what would be the difference between, let's say, the 50 that Doria Sharam tests for, where they don't tell you what you have, but just not compatible, versus J-screen?
Sure. So the one that spoiler alert, we're both positive for the same genetic disorder.
And can you clarify what you shared, how many you have and how many he has, and the unlikelihood of it even overlapping?
It was insane. So we're having this conversation, and I'm like, but I doubt that there's anything. Out of 236, I'm only positive for 4. He said he was only positive for 1. So we're like, there's no way. So we get to our phones, we scroll, have our results, we pull them up, and lo and behold, we were positive for the same genetic disorder. Not just that, out of the 4 I was positive for, this was the worst one. And the least likely that somebody else would have it.
I literally thought she was joking when she said what it was. I'm like, no, that's what that's mine. That can't be yours.
And it's like a very rare one.
Yeah.
So because it is one of the most rare ones.
Is it like 1 in 50,000 or something?
Something like that. Doria Sharam doesn't test for it. I don't believe. There's a lot. So Doria Sharam tests for, the big ones. CF, I'm going blank on the other ones right now. The big ones. Yeah. The big ones. Yeah.
And in that moment, when you saw those results,
I freaked out.
What were you feeling?
I freaked out. We were supposed to have this amazing date the next day that he planned.
Sure.
And I was just like, I don't think I can do this. but I really want to go on this amazing date. Can we still go on it? And he's like,
You did. You wanted to still
I
go. We were
did.
supposed to go horseback riding.
I really wanted to go
There's
on
a
the
whole
date.
thing planned.
I really want to go horseback
And I'm
riding.
like, I don't think I can go on this date with you if you're breaking up with me right now.
And
I wasn't breaking up with him. I said, I need to think about this. This is a big deal. I don't know if I can handle it, but I'm not breaking up with you. I just need a few days to think about this.
Okay.
Sorry, before we go on, the one thing that I wanted to highlight, so the difference between Doria Sharm and something like JScreen, and I know there are other organizations. We just both use JScreen. Other than the numbers tested, the big thing is that you don't get the results, right? So Doria Sharm, like you said, both given ID numbers, you send it in and they tell you if you're a match. But you don't have any real information about yourself or your genetics. You don't know if you're a carrier for anything. You don't know if you're a carrier for 50 things or if they're serious things or what. All you know is this person, do they share something with me that we might pass on to our children? The benefit for what we have, or for using JScreen, is that even if you're just a carrier, where Doria Sharm might not tell you that you're going to match up, if only one of you is a carrier, you still have that information to know, like, do your siblings need to test? Do your children need to test, right? Because it's in your family, it's in your genetics. So I think just that extra information is super helpful. It also, frankly, just means that they don't have to use the exact same service that you use, and people could go other places, right? Doria Sharm, you have to use Doria Sharm. If you use any other testing agency, you just get the name of the disease. You can compare that.
And you just make sure that you were tested for the ones your partner were tested for. You want to make sure that each of you were tested for the ones the opposite one is positive for.
Yeah. I think we'd both be big proponents of those more open testing.
Yeah. There's
groups.
a bunch of testing companies that you can do it.
Okay. Thank you. And to play devil's advocate for those listening, what if someone's saying, well, why do I need to know what it is? Maybe it's going to make me anxious. Maybe it's going to make me nervous.
Knowledge is power.
And I know the reason that they tell you, like, why Doria Sharm does it that way is because some communities there would be
there's
a stigma to it, right? That you're a carrier, you're less than. We're not going to set our child up with you.
Right.
How are we going to? You're a carrier of this, right? And so to
they're
avoid
to
that stigma, this way no one knows who's.
So it's amazing that there's really two options for different communities for different people based on your needs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying the difference.
Yeah.
I love online college. It enabled me to work full time, have a very affordable tuition, and it did not limit any of my opportunities. Personally, I got accepted into every school I applied to for New York City, and I think online schools is the way to go. The Community Testing Center, or better known as CTC, is an incredible online program known as the Rosenbluth Accelerated Bachelor's Degree Program. This is a program where students can earn an accelerated bachelor's degree from a regionally accredited college. The degree is recognized and accepted by graduate schools of all kinds across the US for all career paths. This bachelor's degree could be completed in less than 1 year. It's the best. And there's testing locations nationwide, as well as in Canada and Israel. Also, great news for 5-town students. There's a new testing location in your area with daily testing hours to accommodate your schedule. This is gold. They customize your degree plan to meet your career-specific path, including business, law, accounting, social work, counseling, education, architecture, and other programs. If you want to learn more about their program, you want to attend their open house in the 5 towns. Open house will be held on September 22nd at 11 a.m. You can RSVP in the link below, in the show notes below, and you get $100 off registration when you mention Stories of Hope. Reach Miriam at miriamcommunitytestingcenter.com, www.communitytestingcenter.com. The phone number is below. The link is below. The email address is below. If you are interested in this program, check them out. CTC is the place to be. What was your reaction when you saw the results?
My reaction was probably a little less severe than hers.
I think you're also more of the analytical, let's figure this out now.
So and maybe it was the specific conversation I had with the genetic counselor when I got my results, right? Or the Googling that I did, when I saw it, because I guess I had thought that it was maybe less severe than what she had been exposed to. she was probably more right about it. But like in my mind, it was more like maybe more treatable or less likely. I'm a numbers oriented person. So like statistically speaking, even though we're both carriers, there's still only like 25% chance that they would have that any child would have it and all this other stuff. So like I didn't freak out quite as much as she did about it. So and maybe it was just me being contrary, but when she was like, whoa, we gotta, this is it, we should end it. I'm like, let's think about this for a second. Maybe don't be so hasty. But obviously understanding that it's super serious and, a real thing that has to be talked about.
So for me, I had the science background and...
Right, because you're a nurse.
Yeah. And I knew that the only safe way for us to have children would be to do it through IVF. And I didn't know if I was ready for that, if that's not how I envisioned making a family. And it was very hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that we would not have a family in a natural way. And that's scared me. The idea also that...
And that's still something we struggle with. It is scary,
yeah. The idea that we also always have to be careful. And we had to have the conversation early on, like, okay, what happens if we do get pregnant without IVF and we can test at about 10 weeks a fetus to see if they have this disease? What would we do? We had to have those conversations so early on, which in the end I think made us stronger, but could very well have broken us even more, because I felt very strongly one way, and I think he wasn't quite there yet in the thinking of what would we do, and I was very like, no, this is what I would do. Yeah.
Also talk about the crazy coincidence.
So I'm very big into signs and
like zodiacs or like
no,
divine intervention?
like looking for signs.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when we found out that we were both positive for the same genetic disorder, I was already kind of like, I don't know, we're friends. I don't know if I can see past the friendship. Like, it'd only been 3 weeks. It's a sign. We're not supposed to be together.
And then I replied, 2 weeks ago, you started working at an IVF clinic. If that's not a sign, what is?
Wow.
Maybe 3, whatever it was.
Whatever it was.
I
think it was that week I accepted
She had just started working at an IVF clinic, literally. And I'm like, you want a sign? There's your sign.
And so for those listening who play the sign game, because many people do it.
I still do it.
Yeah. It's only natural. Having a serious relationship with so many unknowns is scary. And it is easier to terminate something, even if it's so good, because it could feel safe and less worrisome, even though it could potentially be someone's spouse. So what would you say to someone that's maybe a little sign happy, that plays that game of like, oh, that must be a sign and that must be a sign, because what comes up is so real and serious, which is part of what makes it a quality relationship, a real relationship, that there's stuff, capital S, that we need to talk about. What might you tell that person? Because you were that person for a moment. Yeah, I was definitely
that person.
Yeah.
Signs, a lot of times when you're a sign person, you're looking for the sign for the negative, I think, and don't blind yourself to the signs for the positive, like I did.
Yeah, I think also, like, if you're looking for it, you're going to find it, right? So whatever you want to find, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, you're going to find a sign that says it, right? So if you're scared and you're thinking pessimistically and the worst is going to happen, then you're going to find something that could be a sign to say that. And if you're looking for permission to do something, you're going to find a sign that says, oh, that's God's way of saying I should do it, right? So to me, I don't put as much, faith in that kind of stuff, but I know Reena does. So.
Yeah, it is. And he played you at your own game. So he's like, you're going to play the sign game. You were just at an IVF clinic.
And that was like his exact words to me also.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like, you want a sign? Here's a sign.
Wow. So what happened after that? Did you continue or did you take a break?
Yeah, so we took a break. We were broken up for about 6 weeks, but because we were friends, we continued to be friends. And
which never really worked.
It doesn't really work once you already started dating.
Well, we should add that our friends didn't know we were dating.
Right.
So
we had to act cool.
So the whole time
we already
before
had like a weekend away planned with friends, so we had to act cool during that. He was like not gonna go, and I'm like, no, you should still come. Our friends totally figured it out over that weekend.
They figured it out before we expected them to, but that's fine. But my point was only they didn't know we were dating when we were dating.
Right.
So they certainly didn't know that we were on a break when we were on a break.
And you want to and how come you kept that private, which I really appreciate and value.
Yeah, I think because I had a previous relationship with a friend and everybody knew about it right away and everybody wanted to know everything right away. And it took away from like the personal aspect of it. You know, relationships are very personal and they can be public at one point, but I think at the beginning it's very important for it to be private because you're just getting to know each other. You don't need to hear all of the little hubbub around you from other people.
Mm-hmm.
You need to figure it out on your own how you feel about that person.
I think
naysayers.
it also plays back to what we were talking about earlier, that fear that like you'd ruin that group dynamic with your friend group. So there's one thing about our personal relationship, but the group dynamic is something else. So if you can save that by, you know, if we just want to see how it goes, right?
Which is kind of what we were doing.
So
like,
especially at the beginning, you know, we don't want to ruin the friendship. So we'll just see if there's anything real to this. Until you know that there is, what does everyone else need to know? Because this way you're not going to risk that group dynamic.
So for
those, a lot of times it's like awkward, like other people make it awkward.
Yeah.
Even if we wouldn't, when we broke up, like even if we didn't make it awkward, it's sometimes surrounding people who are like, well, we can't have both of them at a Shabbos meal because they dated each other. Like, if we don't have the issue with it, you shouldn't have the issue with it.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so much that can be sabotaged when something significant becomes really light and drama talk amongst friends.
Right.
So for those listening that are, again, already thinking of someone in their friend group that they want to consider asking out, because again, like the gain does outweigh the slight con, consider keeping it very private and not having a, I don't know, SNL tea party to discuss it with friends.
Definitely keep it private, in my opinion.
Yeah, especially until you know that it's something real, right?
Yeah.
Like,
especially like if you're friends first, you kind of just need to like figure it out and see, is this even something? So why tell everybody about it?
I love that.
It also protects yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing. So you said very casually, like, we took this 6-week break, but I have a question for you. And this is a question I always love asking people. You know, you were, and Perry, you can answer this too. You're dating for a while. It's so tough. You meet someone, there's potential, and then something comes up that makes you doubt whether or not this can work. Did you have any moment where you were frustrated at God, you were confused at God, an existential doubt? How did you contend with God?
Yeah. There was a lot of
during
emotion.
This process.
There was a lot of internal conflict as well. Remember the day after we found out, we figured this out on a Saturday night, and that Sunday, I just remember going to my sister and talking to her about it and being like, I don't know what to do. I like this guy, but there's this big thing. And then
you also had a lot on your plate at the time. Your father was going through some stuff.
my father was going through some heart surgeries and stuff like that. So there was a lot, and I think that was part of it also. During that, he was so supportive. He was one of the only friends who checked on me every day during it. But yeah, throughout, I think, this whole process of us finding out to doing IVF, there was a lot of like, okay, well, God, why did you have us wait so long to meet each other, so long to get married, and then have this issue as well? Like, it's not fair. This has been a struggle of mine, at least, since we found out. Like, it's not fair that I only got married at 30, and I feel like 5-10 years of potential marriage were taken away from me, of life with him was taken away from me. And not only that, now you're going to make this an obstacle for us as well. There was a lot of anger.
I think we both have very different approaches to our relationship with God. And I don't think that one is closer than the other, but our approach is very different. So while Reena tends to look for more kind of direct, hands-on, like intervention, you know, from God, like the signs, right? And
Hashgacha.
like, right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, she would say, you know, why are you making this happen to us, right? While I tend to approach my relationship with God a little more hands off, thinking that like God leaves a lot of this to us, right? And it's not necessarily divinely intervening on every little thing, right? So sometimes bad stuff happens and it's not God punishing you, right? That's my approach. So it's more, you can say it's a question of faith, and you know, I'm not going to try and look for a reason. I'm just going to try and accept it and move on and make the best of it that you can, and you know, have the best outcome you can without trying to figure out the reasoning behind it, because I feel like that's not necessarily useful. I'd rather focus on how we can move forward.
It's so clear how well the two of you balance each other out. It's really beautiful to see. Thank you for sharing. And being honest on the process, I think is so relatable to people. So thank you for being honest and saying, I'm still figuring it out. It's still really hard. It's not something that is behind me. It's something you're very much both experiencing.
Yeah.
And can you share with us a little bit about what led to you deciding, you know what, this is something that I want to move forward with, knowing everything I know? Because from what we shared together, I know you said you spoke to some doctors to get educated.
Mm-hmm. So I think the day after we found out, his stepmom is a endocrinologist, so you called her and she gave you a little more information about it. I actually had already had an appointment with a reproductive endocrinologist to freeze my eggs because I felt that I was going to be 30 that year. I thought it was very important to invest in my future, basically. That's how I verbalize it. And I already had this appointment, and because I worked in the field, it was with somebody I knew. So I texted her. I was like, hey, do you think we could make this into a 2-parter conversation? Part 1 is freeze my eggs in case our relationship doesn't work out. And part 2 is it possible for us to do IVF and test for this disease? So we got back together about 6 weeks later. This appointment was about 2 weeks after that. I'm like, you're coming with me, which was like ginormous, like bringing him to a very personal doctor. And she like laid it all out for us and was like, this is possible. It'll be hard, but it is possible. And it might not be one IVF cycle. It might take a couple, but yes, it is definitely possible. So we knew at that point that there was a way for us to have healthy children, as that was something that was very important to us, obviously. Right. You know, we didn't care if the child is a carrier, but to have a child with this disease, it would have been, I personally felt that I would be a terrible person to bring a child into this world with this horrible, horrible disease, and the child would most probably die by the time they were 2 or 3.
The quality of life would be bad.
It would,
the age would,
it would be terrible. When we could have easily said no to each other. Who am I to do that to a child? So I needed to know that there was a way for us to avoid that from happening. So we spoke to that doctor. We knew it was a possibility. At this point, obviously, we just had decided to get back together and all of this. So we continued dating, we knowing that this was something we were going to have to do.
And how did you also contend with that acceptance? Because choosing to move forward meant I accept that this is what my future will be like. What was that like for you?
At that point, I was just like, I like this guy. I hadn't maybe felt that way in a year or so, like, you know, maybe in previous relationships. And I knew what those early like feelings felt like. And it wasn't like, I was the type of person who would have mostly one and dones. Maybe second dates, third dates here and there, but it was mostly one and dones. So when there was something, I wanted to explore it. And with him, there was definitely that something there. There was that, I don't want to say it was a spark. There wasn't like this magic, you know, disco ball that went off to tell me this is the guy, but there was something. There was something that I wanted to continue to hang out with him. I wanted to continue to talk with him. We would just talk for hours, and I never got bored. And I think that was something, I think I said it to you even, you know, I don't get sick of you.
How romantic
with you all the time.
That's all it takes.
You know, I could hang out with him all day and I didn't get sick of him. And I was like, okay, this is definitely something.
It's a tough bar to.
You know,
And meanwhile, you had already come to your like intellectual conclusion of this could work.
Right.
you're madly in love with me already.
Madly in love. Yeah, I mean, I think, I was more, you know, I don't want to say down to earth about it, but I was more like settled about, you know, how we could move forward. Very practical. Yeah, good word for it. So I was, you know, focused on the relationship and on getting, you know, getting that deeper into a place that we wanted. And
I have to say, once we made the decision, like, okay, this is something we can do, it went to a back burner. The rest of our relationship was
right.
Did
and
not
that was something that you had
revolve
said.
around it.
Once we made that decision and we spoke to the doctor and knew that this
Right.
was something we could figure out,
Now we're
we
focusing
didn't
on
want our whole relationship to be about that. Right.
And
it
we
was very
hold to that
important
to this day, that our whole relationship was not about this.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds really important when
Mhm.
the crux of a relationship can be about that
Yes.
when you
Right.
want to have children.
Yeah.
And I know that you shared that it wasn't a simple process.
No.
So what was that like for the two of
Yes.
you? We'll start with you.
So we knew that this was something that was going to have to happen. At this point, when we got married, I was 30, he was 36. We knew we didn't want to wait too long to have kids because age is obviously a factor. So I had just some testing done at the clinic that I was working at, and just to see like where I was at, what does my numbers look like, etc. And we were told, you know, you might want to move this up a little bit. So we were,
Ugh,
yeah,
hard to hear.
It was really tough.
It was especially hard because you had the same testing done a year before,
Right, and my numbers were amazing.
and the numbers were great. And so we thought that we'd have more time.
Right. We
then-
didn't want to start the first year of our marriage. We
Right.
wanted to focus on
Shona
us.
would be just for us.
Yeah.
But then right after we got married, the test said
We got
maybe
married in
you shouldn't
October.
wait
In
that year.
December, we did the testing, and they were
Yeah.
like, you might want to move this up a little bit. So we got set up with a testing facility that sent us kits to us and then to our parents. So they did cheek swabs or saliva from our parents and then blood from us.
That was a fun conversation too, telling our parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
We told them before we were married, right?
We
told
did tell them before we were married, but I don't think we told them necessarily the extent of everything. I don't think so. I don't even remember anymore fully. We definitely told them before we got married. They definitely were aware of it.
Did they support your decision?
Yeah.
They did, because
They
we
did.
came backed up with all the information that we wanted for ourselves, right? So like at that
and I'm
time,
going to interrupt you.
yeah.
What would you say right now to a parent listening whose child might be in that position
Support
and they
them.
don't support them? They're too nervous. They're too scared, and they don't understand necessarily how it can work.
I feel that, you know, at that point, we had both been through so much relationship wise, and our age was a factor, obviously, that our parents were just ecstatic that we finally found the person. That, you know, there is modern medicine, thank God. There is IVF, and while IVF is expensive and it's
Difficult.
very hard, yeah, it's rough. It could be rough on the relationship. It's definitely rough on the female body. It's possible. And don't say goodbye to the person you love because that's a factor when, again, thank God there's modern medicine.
Okay. Thank you. And are there organizations that help with the financial aspect of IVF?
There are. So Bone Olam helps. A-Time does a lot of emotional and mental health support and our resources.
Yesh Tikva.
Yesh Tikva is an incredible organization that I've been a part of that gives a lot of emotional and mental support. There's support groups monthly. They're amazing. There's a bunch. There's Stardust that helps also with financials. There are a few.
And these are all like Jewish.
These are all
specific
Jewish organizations. Yeah, there are also definitely other organizations out there, and a lot of insurances are starting to cover it.
Right.
A bunch of states are called mandated states, where if you work for a company that has above 25 employees, they are required to offer you some sort of reproductive fertility coverage.
Wow.
And sometimes, like any insurance company, they'll make you jump through hoops, or they'll
Right.
only be accepted at certain clinics or whatever. But certainly there are options out there.
And people should know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Wonderful. That's so important. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. And as you're in this process and you're hearing that things need to move faster than expected, and how many attempts did you say you had?
We did 5.
5 attempts.
We did 5
retrievals.
retrievals,
5 retrievals.
2 transfers, and a hysteroscopy.
Wow.
Yeah.
What helped you through that process of attempts and loss and trial and loss?
It was really hard. There was a lot of anger towards God, a lot of emotions. Friends were we only told a few friends what was going on. I think it was really just like a few of my close girlfriends knew, and they were really supportive. They were amazing. Our families knew, but honestly, we just leaned on each other the most. And IVF can be very detrimental to a relationship, or it could be very beneficial, in my opinion. I think that if you don't put your full focus of your relationship about IVF, there's potential for such growth in your relationship. We definitely went through a lot of heartbreak, a lot of loss, full cycles that just didn't amount to anything.
Wow.
Time, money, everything. And it was just each other that we, cried to each other. We leaned on each other, but we also had fun with each other. We went on trips. We prioritized date nights.
And that was important, right? Like we said before, we wanted to make sure the whole relationship wasn't about that, right? So we'd make sure, even though we're going through all this, still have time for date night. We still did our, trips, and
we're still newlyweds.
Yeah. Right? And if anyone's listening and they're experiencing this, I really hope that they can benefit from hearing your experience and what works for you and what you would probably sounds like advise for other people.
Yeah, definitely. It's very easy to make your whole life revolve around the IVF process, or, if you're doing IUIs, any type of fertility treatment. But try not to. Try to pull your head out from that and go on that date night. Even if it's like, I really don't want to, I'm like stock full of hormones right now, do it, because you're going to have those memories more than, oh my gosh, I felt so bloated from all the medications that night. I look back, I remember we went to see Wicked, and I, during intermission, had to go into the bathroom and give myself an injection. And we laugh about it now because it's like funny, I had to bring a little ice pack satchel with needles in it. But I don't regret doing it. Like, we went and we saw a Broadway show, and we went out for dinner, and we had a great night.
Wow. It's so hard for people sometimes to focus on like the big picture and the beauty they have when there's so much pain on the thing that they don't have. It sounds like that's something that the two of you have worked really hard on. And how many years were you married for, and how old is your baby?
So we, in October, will be married 3 years, and he is 4 months old now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Took us about 2 years to get. He was born just shy of 2 years of doing IVF.
And what's his name again?
Zeke.
Oh, that must have been sombrous.
Yeah, it was, and that's when basically we told everyone.
That's when we told everybody what happened.
Until then, only our close friends and our family knew.
Maybe a handful of people. That was it. Maybe 10 people.
Part of that is it was important with us to share the story like we're doing now, because we think it's worth knowing, and there's not enough talking about that kind of thing. But at the same time, we wanted the ability to deal with it in our own, in the way that worked for us while it was happening. We didn't want to hear everyone's advice and hear everyone's, 2 cents, even though I'm sure they would have been, well-meaning and they want to help. It's not always helpful, so we'd have that space, and people that we wanted to share with, we could, but most people didn't know. So at the bris, when, we talked about that in the speech, so that was certainly emotional for us.
To people.
Yeah, well, I do have to say, a lot of people are going to know now.
Yeah.
So what's some advice you can tell them on things not to say? In 60
just
seconds.
Relax.
In 60
just
seconds.
Relax.
Don't try and make things better. In general, don't talk about the IVF at all. Just be supportive to the people as people, because they're still people and they're still your friends, and they still want to go out and, and hang out with you and go out for meals and do everything that they normally do.
Yeah.
And as long as they still have that and still have other good things happening in life, it'll make all of the other stuff easier.
Yeah. And then just be there for them. If they want to share, let them, give them the space to share, but don't necessarily prod and ask questions.
Yeah.
If they want to open up, they will. You could just be like, hey, just checking in. I had a friend who, she never asked questions. She'd just be, to this day, she just goes, hey, just checking in. And that to me was an opening if I wanted to say anything, but I also didn't have to respond. And that was probably like the perfect thing.
Right. As opposed to being like, oh, how did that retrieval go? Or what's your next step?
How do you feel? Like the questions. Sometimes the questions
helpful.
can feel very overwhelming, but just saying, just checking in gives you the opportunity to share if you want to share.
Wow. I hope everyone took notes. This is so powerful. It's very brave. And I am so moved by your process, by your journey, by your transparency with dignity and educating those who don't know. I think when people don't know things, there's a lot of shame, insecurity, there's fear, there's misdirection. And the purpose of this episode is to give dignity, to give hope, to give direction to those that can relate in any way to your story. And so as we close, I just want to know if there's anything that you would want to tell a listener who's single, who is struggling, who is in a position that you once were in, if there's any parting message you want to tell them.
Yeah, I think just don't lose hope. Whenever I was starting to lose hope, I would think about, okay, how many older singles do I actually know, right? Most people end up finding their person just in different timings. And that's what I kept thinking about, is like, how many older singles do I actually know? Like people who are older and who are probably never gonna, get married at that point because they're 60, 70 years old. Not many. It will happen. And in the meantime, have fun, enjoy your life, because you're going to be a more interesting person the more experiences you have. I definitely did not take advantage of my single years as much as he did. He traveled and stuff like that. I should have traveled more. But just don't lose hope, because it's very easy to get into that black hole of, I'm never going to get married. This is never going to happen for me. Why doesn't anybody love me? Am I unlovable? Like, I've been down that rabbit hole so many times, especially after relationships ended, and I had to like pull myself out of them. And in the end, he was right there, and I just had to open my eyes a little bit wider. Just, it'll happen. It will happen.
So one thing I'll add, and you always talk about this, I'm surprised you didn't say it yet. Don't put your life on hold.
Right.
So like Reena talks about, like, I should have done this or I should have done that. And I never did, because I always thought, what if I get married in 6 months? What if I meet the person a month from now, or 6 months from now, or a year from now? You can't count on that, right? It'll happen when it happens, and it will happen, but don't put your life on hold. If you want to do that trip, you want to go that place, you want to get that degree, you want to move to that city, don't wait. Do it.
Because also that might be the reason why you meet the person.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
There's definitely been times where I did something where I didn't think I was going to do it, and then ended up meeting somebody.
Yeah, there's a reason for
if you're
everything.
doing things that you enjoy, you're going to be more likely to meet people with the same interests and people that you want to spend time with.
You also come across as a happier person.
Very
and happy
true.
people attract happy people.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to have you here with us and share your story of hope.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching another episode of Stories of Hope. This is pretty crazy, but in the last 2 weeks, our average reach of videos has been from 46,000 to 77,000, and that's with thanks to you. But here's something a little strange. 90% of you are not subscribed. You're wondering, why is it important? If you click the button and hit subscribe, you will get a personal notification when our episode comes out. It's free, it's easy, there's no scam. We just want to get our content to you as easy, as efficient, and quick as possible. So click the subscribe button so that you can get the best in the best way that best serves you. Now, another topic. If you or someone you know has a story of hope and wants to be a part of this revolutionary change, that we are working so hard to do, please contact us at soh@meaningfulminute.org. This is not something that can happen alone. So please don't underestimate the impact you can have. And I want to tell you a little secret. If you're concerned and scared to step forward, or if you think, well, this isn't something I'm comfortable doing, listen, I'm not comfortable doing it either. Change doesn't happen through comfort. Change really happens by doing something that no one's done and by being courageous and brave. So I ask you, please be brave. Please step forward. We've received countless emails of people asking for specific stories from specific demographics. And I've reached out to people in those demographics, and the answer is, I'm so grateful you're doing this. I needed something like this, but I'm too scared to come forward. So if you're listening and you're one of those people, we can simply have a conversation. It's not a commitment. And I appreciate anyone considering to come forward. So reach out with your story at soh@meaningfulminute.org. I will personally be corresponding with you, connecting with you to see if you can help us with this mission for change. And now, for all those that have businesses who want to help support this mission and receive insane exposure, as I've previously said, we've had hundreds of thousands of viewers, and this is just in the beginning. So imagine how much farther that reach can go. Reach out so that we can help you and you can help us by becoming our new friend and sponsor of Stories of Hope. Contact us now at soh@meaningfulminute.org. I'm so grateful and can't wait to hear from you.